Hi, I'm Roger Pine from Holistiplan. This is Winning with Holistiplan. I'm here with Mike Zung. He is going to talk with us today about, technology. We're going to talk about maybe some equity comp things, various things. We're both wearing our tuxedos. Mike, thank you
Right.
for wearing that. We didn't just do this randomly. This was by plan. The idea behind the tuxedo is financial planning doesn't have to be too fancy. It's something that all of us can do. We just got to get started somewhere, and you can work your way up to a full tuxedo one day, but you can start here with a tuxedo. So
Right.
Mike, thank you for joining me. Glad to have you here. Looking forward to talking with you.
Yep. Yeah. I totally appreciate it. I'm really excited to talk about whatever we want to talk about. Yep. And I dressed up. I even tucked in my tuxedo
That's
into
critical.
my shorts.
Critical, yeah. Yeah, that's great. Well, I guess it'd be useful just to kind of set the table with, I'd love to hear about your business, the focus that you have as far as clients go, and maybe just some backstory about how you got into the business, because you have not been a financial advisor your whole life. You came
Right.
from elsewhere. So yeah, just kind of tee it up that way.
Okay. Yeah. Sure. So I started my RAA in 2018. So it's called Java Wealth or Java Wealth Planning. I started it in 2018. I'm based in Kansas City. And so, yeah, as far as just the super quick version of my background is, I actually came from software development, came from IT. So I was a computer science major, and I worked as a developer, a Java developer for many years. So once I came up with that name for a firm, then that definitely spoke to me. So I was basically doing that for a good while, but then almost 20 years. And then basically from that point, I kind of reevaluated things a little bit to figure it's like, is this what I want to do for the rest of my life? And personal finance has been a thing that had always spoke to me. And so basically I just, started to go down the path of like, what would it look like if I would switch to be a financial planner? And just started taking, one step after another. And, I look up now in 2022, and I have have the business. I walked away from IT at the beginning of 2020, in the 2019, beginning 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been doing this full time and having a blast with it.
And you work a lot with clients who are from tech type
Yeah.
backgrounds, a lot of equity comp in there. Is that safe to say if we boil it all down to just a sentence, which I know is hard to do, but
Yeah. So, whenever I first started, it was definitely a thing. It was a conscious decision as soon as I launched, so I joined XYPN, and they're very much of, find your niche.
sure.
And so with me coming from IT, that it's like, well, like I definitely know this world. And so I'm going to work with tech professionals.
Mm-hmm.
And then just along with that, just naturally comes a lot of planning around equity compensation.
Yep. Yeah, and we had met up not too long ago, a few weeks ago, and we commented on the fact that you and I crossed paths like almost at
Right.
exactly the same time. Like
Yep.
I desperately, it took me 20 years, but I wanted to become a software developer. And so that was my dream. And so my midlife crisis was going from being a financial advisor to becoming a software developer, which is what I love to do. That's what I do today, and I love to do. And then
Yep.
almost like literally exactly the same time, like you and I crossed in the hallway going in
Right.
opposite
Right.
directions. So I love that.
Yep. Yeah, we're ships in the night.
Yeah, that was us. Well, good. Well, well, one of the reasons that we connected initially, and I think our firm has really talked with you a number of times, is I think by virtue of you working with so many tech professionals, by virtue of you working with so many clients who have equity compensation, there's a lot of pretty detailed tax planning in there. And I'm going to make a confession here. Like that was not an area of focus for my firm or for me. And so I know this is going to be challenging to boil it down to a short answer, but
Yeah.
what are some of the unique tax planning decisions or services that you encounter when working with this particular population?
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, really, that's just quick side note with it. Whenever I got into this, I was thinking that it's like, oh, we're going to be talking about different kinds of investments and things like that. And so much of the real planning work is around taxes and just first understanding taxes and then just like trying to optimize for it and plan around it, I guess. And so as far as like some of the main stuff, so for equity compensation in particular, well, one, it's just understanding all the different kinds of equity compensation that clients are receiving, and understanding the way that they're taxed, right? So, you have your salary and your bonus, but then whenever you start having RSUs, then trying to map that into it as well. And then kind of putting it into Holistiplan that, figuring out, doing projections on those RSUs to figure out how much box one wage income to add into there, right? And so really the main thing with RSUs, they're generally straightforward, but it's mainly just about, are you withholding enough, or do you need to withhold extra?
I
And
see.
so kind of with that, being able to understand, because with a lot of the clients, they're in the higher tax brackets, and you're good, and just by default the federal withholding is going to be 22%, but they might be in the 32% or 37% tax bracket. And so to be able to show them, within Holistiplan, to say, yep, this is where you are, this is how much you're getting in RSUs, it's only withholding 22%, you're in this bracket, so you actually need to withhold another 10% or 15%.
So that's a cash
Right.
flow type thing with if you're really
Yeah.
tracking, if you're down at the cash flow level with your client, making sure that they're accounting for this
Right.
thing that generates tax liability but doesn't necessarily generate cash initially, right?
Right.
And then
Yeah.
presumably on the back end with different types of options, there's tax planning you're doing there too. What are some
Yeah.
of the unique, and again,
Yeah.
like I admit these are not things I have firsthand experience with. I've learned enough just by being in this company, but
Yeah.
what are some of the, like, client comes in, like, what are some of the questions they'll ask you about someone who has options? What are you trying to solve for there?
Yeah. So options can definitely get pretty hairy, right? And so namely with incentive stock options, or ISOs. So that's the without going into all the details of how exactly they're taxed, but basically being able to understand, if I exercise so many options, depending on the price that it is now versus the exercise price, and creating that bargain element, and like doing the AMT calculation, basically.
Mm-hmm.
To say, it's like, okay, if like, what would happen if I exercise this much? Am I going to trigger AMT? How much am I going to trigger? Things like that. And so being able to do that within Holistiplan is so valuable. It's awesome. Like, I know, I don't know if this is necessarily just supposed to be an infomercial for Holistiplan, but I'm totally
It's really
willing to do
not.
that.
It's an infomercial for you, actually, but that's
Right.
fine.
Yeah. So, but yeah, within Holistiplan, being able to run different scenarios that say, if I exercise this much, then how much AMT are we triggering?
Mm-hmm.
Ballpark,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because if it gets too much, then I do say, hey, let's talk with your tax professional too, to really get more fine grained. And then the thing that Holistiplan did fairly recently was that AMT crossover calculation, where you can basically be plugging in a bunch of numbers just for how much income you're making and everything, and then just say it. Then you just push this button to say how many ISOs can I exercise before I trigger AMT, and it just be able to tell you right there. So,
Is your goal always, it's not necessarily to always just avoid AMT at all costs, right? That's just part of the equation.
right.
I think that's sometimes a thing that gets in people's minds, like, I'll do anything I can to avoid
Right.
AMT. But the reality is, like, it's almost like a flat tax. Like, if you can trigger AMT, sometimes it's not such a bad thing compared to
Right.
some of the alternatives, right?
Yeah, it definitely, people are more scared of it than I feel like they should be.
Yes.
And so yeah, it's definitely not just like, hey, like, let's try to avoid AMT. Although I think a lot of, just part of the tech professional brain, that engineering brain, they're always wanting to try to optimize as best as possible from a tax perspective. So that helps scratch that itch, I think. But
I see.
then,
Yeah.
I also try to give the more broad conversation of just like, okay, what do you actually need this money for?
Yeah. What are we optimizing for?
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, we're not just trying to, squeeze every last penny out of it. And as the market has shown recently, that sometimes trying to optimize for taxes, but if the actual stock price goes down quite a bit, then you're gonna clobber your tax savings pretty quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny you said AMT, or you said something along the lines of it's scary. Like a CE, like a CFP CE session that I want to do is just called AMT Not So Scary. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Because like sometimes it's the tail wagging the dog on
Right.
it's just another way of calculating the tax bill that is scary because it seems complicated, but actually when you really unpack it, it's maybe less complicated than the normal
Right.
tax code. You know what I mean?
Right.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
that's
Definitely.
for another day. That'll be our next webinar, Mike.
Right.
Well, I want to make sure to talk about something that you've become famous for, internet famous, and that is your work with data visualizations. I think probably arising out of the fact that you have a software development background, you're very comfortable building your own tools or amending the tool set that are out there. And I wanted to, I want to highlight that Mike has become famous for a set of how would we describe them? Client deliverables, client
Yeah.
visualizations that he's actually packaged up into a product. I think it wasn't your plan, but enough people asked for it. They're like, "Can you share this with us?" You're like, "Yeah, sure, okay." And it's called Beautiful Financial Plan, right?
Yep.
And that's kind of launched, and that's out there as a tool set for advisors who want to do some better work with how they explain things to clients.
Mm-hmm.
How did that? Maybe I did a 80% job of explaining, but how did that come about? Like, how did you start taking your tech stack? And maybe we can get into like how do you go about building your tech stack? I'd be interested in covering that. But
Yeah.
at some point in time, you said I need to build some other things.
Right.
And so, what went into that mindset as you said, okay, I'm going to build some tools for a very specific reason?
Yeah. Yeah. So for that, I definitely feel like an accidental entrepreneur in that perspective, where with my background, I didn't come in with the prior financial planning experience working under another firm or anything like that, and so whether that's good or bad is a whole other conversation.
Hmm.
But so my experience whenever I started to work with clients is just trying to figure out, like, just essentially creating a process and creating different deliverables to say, okay, what's the best way to communicate all of this stuff that we do in a way that can actually make sense to a client? Because you only get an hour with a client, and I work virtually, so I'm screen sharing, and that's a really valuable time. And so anytime that I would try to use financial planning software or anything else, or sometimes I use this whiteboard here, then it's like it can get a little bit clunky. And so it's like, okay, I just want to try to boil down what actually matters to them so that we can create as much space in our meeting for good conversation. And honestly, it was really just born out of that, where I started doing that for my own clients. And then as I'm going along and I'm working with, I connect with other financial planners and get in study groups and things like that. I started to just say, like, hey, I have this client situation. Here's what I'm showing them so far, right? And so it kind of spread a little bit from that, where one of the first planners, Brian Face, so shout out to him if he watches this. He, like, from the get-go, he's like, you need to package this up and distribute this to people. People need this, right? But I was just like, no, it's Google Sheets and Google Slides and things like that, right? But trying to fast forward a little bit, so then sometime it was last fall, where so I mentioned being part of XYP, Michael Kitces had put something out in the XYPN forum to say, hey, does anybody create their own custom deliverables? And so the different people that I've shared it with in the past, like my study group people and everything, they're just like, hey, Mike has something. And so it's like, okay, well, I'll just create a sample client and I'll put it out there and share it with everybody. And so that got picked up to where I got invited to present that to, it was the Financial Planning Value Summit last December. And so I presented just the stuff that I've been doing. And, there was a good number of advisors that were on that. So they saw that, reached out to me, say, hey, do you sell this? And it's like, well, not yet. It's like, but just kind of, but there was enough momentum there to where it's like, okay, let's package all this stuff and that definitely made me think differently about, it's one thing to just create something just for yourself, but whenever you're trying to create it for distribution for other people, right?
Willing to put up with
other advisors,
different levels of user friendliness if it's just you versus for public consumption.
Yeah, it's like there's some stuff where I know the little workaround for this, but whenever I'm trying to distribute it out, then I had to be a lot more thoughtful for the way that things were designed and things like that. So I stood that up in late March, I think. And so kind of have the platform where it has the templates and a bunch of videos that walk through a lot of the process. And then the next thing that I'm going to be rolling out here pretty soon, hopefully this week actually, is to where try to create a more community aspect to it, so that everybody that has opted in, that there's more of there's a forum and a chat room and a message board and everything where we can bounce ideas off each other and figure out what's the next iteration and evolution of the whole plan packages. So I'm kind of excited for that part.
Yeah, well, I mean, congrats on that. That's a great story. I love it. You mentioned going straight into being solo, having your own firm. And when I joined the business, I joined an existing firm, and so they had, which was a benefit and a drawback. I think they had all that infrastructure, right? Not only did we have all the ways that we would present the plan and build the plan, and that was all there. We also had like this library, like a library. It was almost kind of like this word of mouth library of all the anecdotes, you know what I mean? So like when we were talking about like umbrella insurance, we'd be able to say, yeah, we had a client once, and this is why umbrella insurance was really valuable to them. And it's amazing how useful those are to be able to grab onto those.
Right.
So that was the benefit for me. Like I was able to ramp up, I think, very quickly without having to build infrastructure.
Right.
But I do think in hindsight, by not having to build it, I didn't have to be maybe as methodical and thinking about, okay, how would I build it from the ground up? And how would I build the product with the feedback from clients? And so, and I think there's a lesson for all of us, which is, be it in software or any service, like you got to keep listening to your client. You can't let these things ossify to the point where this is how we've always done it.
Right.
Build, buy things, try them out. I think that's the only way that we can make sure that we continue to do the best we can do.
Yep.
One example I can think of is, and I think part of the reason you became famous is the I keep using that. I know it makes you blush, but I think it's just
it cracks
apologies.
Me up. Both that, and then also the fact that I call it a beautiful financial plan, that cracked me up for the longest time, because I was doing that Kitces thing. People were like, who, like, did you hire a designer and to do all this stuff? And me coming from back end software development world, like I think that like my eyes that I make kind of ugly stuff, but apparently it was and Michael Kitces was the session was called like creating a beautiful deliverable. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna glom onto that.
Well, I can assure you the stuff that I build, the version 1 of Holistiplan and basically everything else in our product is definitely not beautiful. We have other people to help make my stuff more beautiful.
Right.
But what I was going to get at is you use a Sankey diagram. And I think that's, when I look back, I don't think I'd ever seen a Sankey diagram until maybe like a few years ago. They showed up in your stuff, but they've also showed up like online, like Reddit.
Yeah.
Like people will
Yeah.
show
Yeah.
like, I interviewed for 10 jobs and I got a second interview in 4 and I got offered in
Right.
2 and I took this one. And you
Right.
start to see it. And I know there was one, like I had 10 Tinder dates, and I won't play that one out to the end, but you know what I'm saying? Like I've seen it in a number of places, and you're using it in your stuff. And we're actually working on some Sankey diagram stuff
Oh, nice.
ourselves. I don't know, like where, do you know where that came from? Like, how did you wake up to the idea that that was a
Yeah.
visualization tool? Do you remember?
I don't remember the first place that I saw it. It was probably Reddit, because yeah, Reddit loves Sankey diagrams.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then it was just like, what I was saying at the beginning, where just trying to figure out, okay, how do I show this in a succinct way? And so the where Sankey diagram, where that came up for me
we
was
should we should define things, by the way.
oh
Sorry. You want to try to
yeah.
define what a Sankey diagram? That's my fault for not
Yeah,
doing that.
so yeah, I guess maybe I should have had something prepared where I could lift it up. But yeah, basically what you can visualize is that it shows, so it's just an image that shows different inputs flowing in, and then different outputs going out the other side. And so it's just kind of flowing like, and so just talking about it in the perspective of how I use it, like the inputs are different sources of income, right, in a year, right? So it's like you can have, one partner's salary, and then another partner's salary, and then maybe a bonus, and then whenever we talk about equity comp, like RSUs, and if I would exercise and sell stock options,
Mhm.
right? So those are all different inputs that go in, and then all of the outputs is everywhere that money is going, right? And so it's able to visualize, the money that's going out for taxes, and the money that's going out for savings and expenses and things like that, right? And it's to scale for, the amount that's going in and the amount that's going out. So it's a very quick way that people can see like how much money is coming in and everywhere that it's going. And
Right.
so just with that one image, you can convey all of that information without, having to scan through a spreadsheet or anything like that.
Yeah. It's a very effective way of showing big to small. Like where is, especially for cash flow, like where is my money going?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's one of the biggest questions whenever people say, it's like, we make all this money, but we have no idea where it goes.
Yeah.
Like, well, let's map it out.
And instead of just showing numbers or just percentages on a pie chart, you actually see the width of,
Right.
okay, if 30% went towards housing expense, 30% of the width of all the expenses, it kind of
Yeah.
shows there are these wider streams and smaller tributaries. So
Right.
I think it's a really fascinating visualization that's kind of come out of nowhere, but has become really big in a lot of disciplines over the last few years. So kudos to you for finding it. You have to be one of the first people who did, and I think we're going to see a lot more of it
Yeah.
in years to come. Okay, we talked about beautiful financial plan, and we talked a little bit about building things versus buying things. And I guess my last question for you is, especially as someone who's a tech professional, you could have built everything, I guess, if you wanted
Right.
to. Clearly, you had to put together a tech stack. How have you gone about doing that? How have you gone about building the tech stack? Where do you experiment versus where do you go with name brand stuff? Or like, how do
Right.
you, and build versus buy? How do you
Right.
approach that?
Yeah. So I mean, I definitely, I guess, I don't want to reinvent the wheel by any means, right? And so if there's something out there that already does what I need to do pretty well, right, then I'm going to lean on that, right? So I mean, just a little bit of the tech stack. So Right Capital, for example, is one where like I use that. I think it's a great financial planning software. I haven't tried eMoney or Money Guide Pro or anything like that, but like I feel like, okay, what I have here will work, right? And just side note, I've actually talked with Right Capital about whenever they brought out their snapshot view.
Mhm.
A lot of that was born out of showing like, hey, this is what I'm currently doing for creating the snapshot. And so they added that in there. And so it's like, that's awesome. So yeah, kind of the side note from that whole beautiful financial plan, if it becomes obsolete because full-on software is able to replicate all of that stuff, then that's a total win for me, right? This is just all about trying to push things forward. So yeah, and I knew that I didn't want to get back into actually trying to develop software, because I know, and now, how much work that actually is. It takes some things that to an end user feels like this should be really simple to do. Like, there's a lot that goes into the software development process, and making sure that things are architected in a way that can scale and pivot and things like that. And so that's why, the stuff that I did, it's specifically not software. I tell people, like, this is not a separate, like, fintech software or anything like that. And it's more of an accessible, like, hey, if you know how to do PowerPoint and Excel, then you can work with this, right? And so yeah, I don't know if I'm answering the question right, but the kind of the last thing of, like, whenever I figure out if I need to build something, it's just like, hey, if there's not something that is communicating the way that I feel like it should, then I feel capable enough and empowered enough to say, well, I'm just going to make something that will do that job for me, right? Yep. And so yeah, like I was saying, but I do it in a quick and easy way, to where I'm not going out and trying to crank out a bunch of code to make it work.
Yeah. So yeah, it's totally true. And yes, people don't realize changing that button from a blue button to a purple button, you would think is easy, but there's
right.
always more to it.
Right. Yeah. There always is. I mean, I was always an eternal optimist whenever trying to estimate how much time some development change was going to take, but it would always take at least twice as long, if not 3 times as long.
Yeah. And we could talk about the concept of technical debt on another call, but that's another. And the short version is, like, you take a little shortcut now, be like, well, I'll get this feature out now and I'll fix it later. And then fixing it later is like building the Golden Gate Bridge.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, and that's, and we mentioned this whenever we talked before, but that was one thing, in the background of being a developer and then also doing a lot of software architecture work. That is one thing that I feel like with Holistiplan, how quickly that you all have been able to add different rules for potential proposed tax changes, and different things like that. It just spoke to the underlying architecture of it. It's like, that's pretty good to be able to, like, a new proposed bills comes out, and then I'll say a couple of weeks later that you have, like, hey, you could actually run this in Holistiplan. That was pretty impressive.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, honestly, the hardest part for us is, and this is a problem for Microsoft and everybody, is backwards compatibility.
Yeah.
Right. So what'll happen is, so for example, a thing we just pushed out, like literally today, we haven't even done an announcement on it, but it's out there now, is calculating the tax you pay if you have to reimburse an ACA, an Obamacare credit.
Oh, okay.
Obamacare credit was more than what you, and there's actually some really interesting breakpoints, like huge breakpoints, like in the range calc screen. But previous to today, we just said, we don't calculate that. Just throw a number in this field. Okay. So it was like a hard coded thing where you, the user, would have to enter it.
Right.
But now I have this situation where all these people have put a number in that box, but now I can calculate a different number.
Right.
And what do I do if our calculated number is different from the number that you entered?
Right.
If I just deleted your number, you could go back to something you had created a month ago, and suddenly the end tax bill is different.
Right.
And so that's a thing we really struggle with, and just trying to, and we're doing something with charity where we're going to just this week actually roll out a whole charity change. And that's
Yep.
the hardest part. So it's not necessarily the code, it's trying to bring all your user base forward without breaking what they've already done,
Right.
especially when they've like, you know, gone through numbers with their clients that they may
Right.
have taken action on.
Right.
So that's
Yeah.
actually the hardest part.
Yeah. And that just makes me think of, and not to just completely, you know, not to pick on any particular software or anything like that, but, you know, whenever I was thinking through like the financial plan package and what to be able to show, one thing that I kind of knew in the back of my mind is that, you know, your Money Guide Pros, your e-monies, like people are saying, it's like, why can't they just create something like this? Like, you got to understand that these software tools have been around for a long time, and so they've collected a bunch of this stuff, and so trying to change directions or being able to stand up something new is not an easy thing. Right. So it's like it's more of the turning the aircraft carrier,
turning
than,
the aircraft.
you know,
Exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, so I feel like that's the one thing of, hey, if I have a version where it's just, you know, within like slides and stuff like that, it's like, hey, we can stand up new modules just by sitting down and creating a new module today, right?
Yep.
And we don't have the weight of all that other stuff, right?
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. Yes. So yeah, I'm sure we could talk software for
Right.
years, and probably something you don't want to do, but I would love to do. But
yeah, it's like, is this a software podcast?
All right. Well, thank you for that answer on building your tech stack. So I think that's really all the questions I had for you. One of the things we do every time we do one of these calls is we do Roger in the hot seat, where we do an unrehearsed. If you have an uncomfortable question that you want to ask me, I'm happy to give it a shot. Anything come to mind there?
Well, I mean, there were a couple, but actually one. So I was talking to somebody who knows Ben pretty well, and
my colleague Ben Birkin.
Yeah, Ben Birkin. Yep.
Yep.
And they mentioned that everyone at Holistiplan has a karaoke song, like a go-to karaoke song.
Yes.
So I guess so, and I know, and I used to listen to your podcast, your the Zebra Smash podcast, right?
Yeah.
And so I've seen some various various different kind of songs and parodies, and you have your keyboard in the background. So I guess what's your go-to karaoke song?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and Ben's right. And a lot of our support team are friends of mine from musical theater.
Oh, really?
Here, yeah, in Bryan College Station, I do a lot of musical theater, or I used to before pandemics and before this company came along. I did a lot of that, and so we have a lot of just incredibly talented people on the staff. And so karaoke we have incredible karaoke nights here. It's true. I prefer to do duets. I always enjoy being up there with someone else. I don't know if that's a personality thing or something, but I love doing, Suddenly Seymour is a fantastic one from Little Shop of Horrors. So I love that. If I got to get up there solo, I'll sing Family Tradition by Hank Williams Jr.
Okay.
Because it's got some audience participation where people yell stuff back out. So yeah, that's my answer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very
Did
cool.
you have, what was the other question, or was that the hardest one you had for me?
Well, I mean, the other one that, like, just thinking more from a professional perspective of like, and it's a variation of a question that I asked as clients, is that, like, if 2 years from now you could wave a magic wand, like, what would Holistiplan look like?
Oh, I see. I think we keep leaning into what we're doing. I mean, one of the reasons that you and I are talking today is that I think we have similar focus on client deliverables and client conversations. I'm kind of late to the party there. That's been a awakening, a realization I made just very recently. The first 3 years of Holistiplan was very much, I approached from the perspective of process. If we just help advisors go through the process, and if we train them on all the steps you would do to do this thing and then that thing and then that thing.
Right.
And we built a lot of that stuff, but then kind of at the end, we were just like, okay, you've done it. You've calculated how much qualified charitable distribution to do, or go ahead and figure out how to communicate that Roth conversion. But we don't give them we haven't given them the tools to do that. And so we have actually in the next few weeks, quite a number of new products coming out related to having those conversations.
Yeah.
And so to me, I'm not saying that that's my 2-year vision, but to me, like, that's an indication of there's still so much we can do. If we've built this tax calculation engine, which is hard, that's hard to do. What can we do to use that to help advisors just give richer financial planning to their clients? I think it means more ways to visualize what you're doing, more ways to describe, have meaningful conversations on what we're doing. So, I mean, that's kind of where my blinders are over the next 6 to 9 months. You're going to see a Sankey diagram from us too. And so I think ultimately, as long as it supports that vision of helping advisors deliver richer financial planning to more clients, I'm all for it. Okay. There was a time when I thought that we would start with tax and go super broad. And there's still things I want to do. There's things I want to do with the state big time.
Oh, yeah.
There's things I think we could do with just property casualty. I mean, that's not a super sexy part of the plan, but it's important. You know, I would love to build those things, but I also know that if we can stay focused and keep having tax be where we focus and where we deliver a lot of value, I think there's plenty we can do there.
Right.
So hard to know. I mean, by the way, had you asked me 2 years ago where in my wildest dreams I thought we would be now, I mean, I would have never anticipated us being where we are now. So it's hard to know in tech, like how fast things can go, you know, and where your clients guide you to, right? You're dealing with this too with your venture, which is your customers are going to tell you, like, I really need this other thing.
Oh yeah.
You know, or they may not say it in those words, but they keep saying, I sure, your product's great, but it's not helping me do it. It's not solving this problem for me.
Right.
And so that's part of my job is I would hope that in 2 years, we've helped people solve some more problems.
Right. Know? Yeah. I mean, it's definitely, it's difficult to try to, like, any guess that you would make at more than 2 years from now of what you think you want it to look like or what it will look like is going to be so wildly off anyway.
Yeah. I mean, it helps to have a roadmap. I mean, like if you like tackled me and said, give me the things that you want to have, I would love to have like a sweet estate visualizer out there. I would love to have this property casualty thing. Right. But I wouldn't be disappointed if in 2 years we just had some amazing additional tools around that are just around tax or whatever that other thing is, you know, we'll see.
Right. Yep. Okay, cool.
Good. Well, okay. So we always finish on one question for you.
Right.
Because the title of the thing is Winning with Holistiplan. We're like, what is big things you're doing? And so we always finish with the question, what is the most epic thing that you've done in your life, personally, professionally? There's got to be something. What is it?
Right. Yeah, I know. You even sent me this question beforehand, and it's like, I don't know. It's like that. I don't know what that says about me. So, I mean, the things that came to mind, and it's not necessarily something that I've personally done, but like more like personally experienced. So I'm a huge soccer fan, and Liverpool Football Club is my team. I have my Anfield, you know, my
got it
up there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So they have before every match. I went to Liverpool a few years ago, and well, it was pre-pandemic, so it was and then so they have a song, and it's called "You'll Never Walk Alone."
Right.
It's probably the most beautiful lyrics you'll ever hear, even if you're not.
As a musical theater fan, it comes from a show called Carousel.
Yep.
Correct? Isn't that from Carousel?
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. You'll never walk alone.
You might be the only person that it's like that's a different audience that remembers, like, oh, that's actually from a musical.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's like just the lyrics are just amazing, and so the experience of going to Anfield is the stadium. Like in Liverpool, before every match, the entire stadium, they play "You'll Never Walk Alone," and everyone sings it, and just that experience of that many people just kind of, I don't know, it's like a religious experience, right?
Mm.
So I don't know, there's just something super powerful about that. So whenever I heard epics, like that was probably one of the most epic moments of my life, right?
Amazing.
So yeah, I mean, that definitely, from that, I mean, from a professional experience, honestly, that might be why I left software development, because I didn't really feel like I was doing epic work in any way.
I see.
And so just kind of being able to switch and do this, and kind of also like what we were saying with having no idea what things would actually look like just a couple years down the road. Like, I had no idea that I would start my own business, and that I would start this other side business too, that like for the Beautiful Financial Plan, and just kind of where the doors that feel like they're opening. And so yeah, I mean, it's just been a fun ride, basically.
I love it. Yeah. Well, congratulations on both of your ventures.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's true. Like, you're able to see one of the things that's hard for me that I don't miss a lot, but what I do miss is I don't get to see firsthand the impact
Yeah.
that, like, we'll email the advisor and say, hey, it looks like your client made a mistake on their return, and I think they can get like a couple $1,000 back if they
Right.
refile. And the
Right.
advisor's like, thanks. And that's it. And like, and we don't ever see like where that goes,
Right.
whereas you working directly with clients, you're able to actually see not only in the moment, but also over time as they start to meet those goals, and you're able to kind of
Right.
help them along that path. That is the thing I miss that you don't get to do when you're just behind the screen.
Right. Right. Yep. Yeah. Well, if that ever happens to me based off of something from Holistiplan,
Yes.
I'm
Just
going to send
close the
you.
loop.
I'm going to
Thank
send
you.
you something. Yeah,
Thank
close
you.
the loop. Yeah. I mean, but it's true. Whenever I was doing development, anytime that we would get like end user feedback that said, "Hey, this is really awesome,"
Yes.
it's like, "Hey, great! Like, we're actually, like, there's a reason why we're doing this now."
Right. Yeah. Honestly, like, if something gets escalated to me on the development side, it's not someone who's happy. Like, it's usually so like my colleagues will go to conferences and they'll be like, people love us. And I'm like, who
Right.
are these people? And they're like,
Right.
you need to come meet them because
Right. Yeah.
I don't always see it. You know what I mean? So
Yeah. Yeah. You need to come and get a little ego boost every once in a
I
while.
need it.
People.
Trust me, I need it.
Yep. Yep. But yeah. I mean, it's definitely true about, just from like, that is one thing that I really do enjoy now, is that just the kinds of conversations I'm able to have with clients and with people, that it's like, it's way more engaging than any conversation that I had, in my previous role and previous career.
Sure.
So yeah, I'm able to have more interesting stories to talk to my wife about after I'm done working.
I believe it. Well, good. Well, Mike, this has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me and sharing your stories. We covered a lot of ground. And so best of luck with the new venture, the Beautiful Financial Plan.
Yep.
And I hope to talk with you soon.
All right. Yeah, I appreciate it.